Welcome to oh, sorry. You're gonna have to
scratch that and start
scratch
again.
that. This is Cynthia with Revived and Restored, and we are here today with Valencia and Kim. And I'm kind of a little giddy this morning. I think I started drinking coffee. And I haven't done it in 2 months, and I had a cup today, and I
Oh
think
my
I'm a little
gosh.
bit wired. My daughter, and we're laughing today, but oh my goodness. Anyway, we're talking about fear, which I don't have at this moment.
I have none.
I'm in fear right now, but I definitely have struggled through it, and it does show up every once in a while, right? And we're going through the Waking Up Gray book, Creative Awakening, and we work with a group of women, so we want to share Revived and Restored. We're a nonprofit organization that we are there to help bring community and building community in the communities that we live of being revived and restored in the presence of God, right? And with his son, Jesus. So here we are, and we're sharing a little bit about the fear,
6.
moving through fear. How do we move through fear? And I was just bringing up with them that there's 365 verses in the Bible that talk about fear. 365 times that it says, do not fear. Do not fear. 365 times. There's one for every day.
Yep.
Of the year. It's
That'll
like,
be easy
isn't
to
that,
remember. Yeah.
That is so powerful to know. Like, what was the one thing that God,
that he was emphasizing that a little
yes,
bit.
I think so. Like, do not fear.
Yes.
For he is near. He is with us, right? And so there's so many false beliefs, and that's something that we go through is like, false beliefs really come through our childhood because we don't know how to process. And if we're not being trained up in the ways of the Lord, where his presence is there, not just in religion and knowing scripture and all, but I mean, where his presence and where you have an encounter, you experience him, which probably most of us don't raise up in. And I didn't do that well with my children as well, but I've come through learning, more. And I think the newer generations, more of that will happen as more freedom comes, right, for the next generation. So that's, our hopes, but those false beliefs are there. And so until God shines that light. And so how do we walk through those fear and then learn to operate out of freedom? How do we, transforming our mind and renewing our mind and coming out where fear has less power over us, right?
I remember as a little girl, I was probably about 10 or 11. I always felt happy as a kid, but we had gone to my aunt's house, and there was a big bright street light, and all of the bugs were attacking the light. And I was outside, and one of them hit me, and I felt the fear. I mean, that was so weird. I looked back, and my aunt was always fearful. So I think that at that point, fear attached itself to me. And then I had another experience where I had a really bad fever. And again, it was a bug that was, my mom had grabbed the bug off the floor, and then she came because I tripped on the stairs, and I saw the bug. I didn't see her trying to help me. So the fear was just like, So this is one that I've really walked through, is how to get out of that fear.
And I don't think fear is,
it's not one dimensional,
right? And or that it's I'm gonna say,
it's not always a spirit,
right?
Not always a bad thing.
Sometimes fear is good to have when there's danger and you're sensing it and there's something fearful. I think God gave us that emotion, right? But it's when it takes heart, when it goes into our heart and our mind, and it becomes part of who we are, and that's how we operate out of life. That's where
it's like the lens you start viewing everything through.
And they do talk about fear coming through those early experiences, and it can be all sorts of things. Losing control, being a failure.
Oh yeah. Being abandoned, rejection, all those things, losing. I remember going through a whole list of all the things that I was fearful of, what was my fears. And I had like a couple pages of all this fear. And it was, an exercise to say, I'm cutting that off and giving it to the Lord and laying it at the foot of the cross and then burning it up. And like that was giving it to the Lord to say, show me something new and something different.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's becoming more God aware. Then he shows you that you're self-aware of those fears, and then you're able to realign it. And he gives his truth as you go and read his word and say, Lord, how do I combat this? What do you say about this? And then bringing that, and that's where real freedom comes. So it's kind of this has been, I think it's a difficult chapter to go through because it does, as you go deep and you're kind of, going through the questions and going through kind of you're self-aware of what is it, how am I really operating? What am I operating out of? How am I living my life? And God bringing to light those things that you're still operating out of fear.
Yeah.
And so it's a powerful study. And it's like, and been coming to the Lord, and then it's like, wow.
The freedom feels wonderful.
And something that I think I came through was that distractions, when I give into distractions, they keep me from the creativity with the Lord, right? And working through. But I allowed the distractions because I had a fear of going to that depth of creativity.
That's interesting.
So
I feel like, this happened maybe years ago. And I've shared a little bit about this in previous talks with you guys, but there was a time when I used to do graphic design and multimedia, and God just kind of took me out of all of that. I was in a really negative work environment and stuff, and there was just a really big shift in my life, and it was at a time where the market was kind of flooded with all these new graduates with these design degrees, and .coms were really kind of new, and they all were like failing because nobody knew how to do like e-commerce and all this stuff. Now it's just so solid. We can't even imagine that. And it makes me feel really old to say that happened when I was an adult and could actually have a job. I think I was like maybe 19 or 20 actually. But anyway, all that is to say, I went through a period where I had kind of gone into that field because I remember my dad telling me, well, they don't call them starving artists for nothing. And, he was a physician. So he didn't necessarily, he really valued the arts and all those things. But as far as being able to make a living, he questioned that for sure. So this seemed like, okay, this is medium ground. We can do this and there will be security, but I can also do something creative. But I was really not very happy, honestly, doing it. It was okay. But when the rug got pulled out from under me on that, I realized like I did the thing I didn't really want to do because I thought there was more security in it, and it still failed. And that was like, I had a massive paradigm shift in my life. And I was like maybe 21 when that happened. And I remember just thinking, and I was like depressed, but the Lord like showed up in that space. And I physically like remember him, like I felt this sensation of like falling, like emotionally, I was not well. Because I did not know what to do. And I had applied for all these jobs and I couldn't get a job. And I was like paying rent on this apartment that I couldn't afford. And I remember like God, physically, I could see like his hand holding me.
Wow.
It felt like one of those, remember those like in the 80s, those giant plastic hand chairs?
Yeah.
My sister had one of those when I was a kid. And I felt like it was like that, like you're sitting in his hand like that. And it shifted so much about how I felt about stability and how false all of it is. Because at that point in time, I wasn't really walking with the Lord. I didn't even know what that looked like beyond like church on Sundays. But even with my lack of knowledge, like the Lord was tangible to me in that space. And I think that's really where he like started weaving this dance with me. And it took a long time for me to get to this place, where I'm walking it out, or where I was even just doing normal church attendance, getting plugged into these groups and all the stuff. That was like, more than a decade of walking things out. But it's just amazing how even like when reality slams into you, when you've done all these careful maneuvers to keep things in boxes, and then you realize, like, that's all false security anyway. Like, the Lord is absolutely in control of it all. And a long time I wrestled with, like, but what is he going to do to me? Like, I feel like he knows, like he knows what's best for you, but maybe that's going to be horrible and painful. And what am I going to have to go through in order to be, refined and better in the long run? Which, it's like, okay, what pain am I going to have to go through?
Yeah.
I was so scared
Lord.
of him, even. Like, what is he going to do?
Take me anywhere, and fearing that you're going to go into the middle of Africa.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
as
and
a
that
missionary
yeah.
with no food, no clothes.
And like, for me, that
would be interesting.
I was going to say that doesn't sound that scary to me. I'm like, that's intriguing, and actually I have that in my heart to do that. But maybe when I was 18 I wouldn't have. But see, he weaves all that, and we don't, when we're not thinking about that he prepares us slowly and gently to take these steps of faith. And she talks in the book about how, there are very real dangers, like you mentioned, but that there's a point where we realize that certain things are worth the risk, that you step out because it's worth it. Because frequently we're leaving something, right? We're stepping out because this other thing has is fruitless or has become painful in a way that we're not willing to be in agreement with it anymore. And we have to step out in faith. And that it is in that space that, your courage wells up, and you can take a step of faith. And I think, that's absolutely God making you able and equipping you for whatever your next step is. And just to see this all in, like, artistically and everything else that issued from that space originally, it's like, I look back over that and I think, wow, I mean, things have been so out of control in my life so many times since then, and a lot of uncertainty, but I feel like it's far more fulfilling, and even in this place of life where I think, I wouldn't have stayed home with my babies. And that was hard in various ways, but I'm so grateful, especially as we get into this, like, teen season. Thank God I got to sit and get their colored chalk all over me while I sat on the back porch and drew with them. I mean, thank God that I got to do that, because not everybody does that. And I got that, and I got to sit and have them bring me dandelions in my hand and tell me how much they love me. I got to do that with them. Not that you don't get those in snippets, but I got to do that all day, every day. And we sacrificed to do that. But thank God I did that instead of sitting at my neat little, design job. I'm thankful for it. And in this phase of life right now where I'm like, man, what am I going to do when I grow up? My kids have gone back to school now. I'm wondering, what am I going to do? And so those questions come up again, and you think, gosh, if I had done XYZ before, I could be making a lot of money or whatever. And it's like, but it's not about that. You just don't know what those next things are, and you want fulfillment, and you're hopeful. And so you sit in a place of waiting, and you get prepared to take the next step, whatever that looks like. I mean, doing this is crazy.
Yeah,
that's true.
Yes.
I never thought I would be doing something like this. I just get a picture of the Lord holding our hands. He's never going to make us walk into something without him holding our hands, and how safe that feels.
Yeah.
I love it. This chapter seems to go, like you said, very deep, very ow. Oh, I didn't know that. You had mentioned when we were coming here about the Lord helping you recognize the areas of hate and jealousy and
envy.
And those are also like fears. But the Lord brought you to where you could let go of those.
Yeah. So jealousy, envy, and hatred. He was showing me that how the interconnection and interwoven it is, hatred, and then which leads to a spirit of murder through those three. But they kind of hang together, those three, and then which creates that spirit. If you don't deal with it, where you desensitize yourself to love, really.
Mm-hmm.
And so what the Lord showed me was that I was working with inner city kids
Mm-hmm.
at the time. And in my church, I didn't feel like I was being recognized, or they never would ask me questions. It was, oh, you're just doing a little kids thing, whatever. But it was all ages, and it was amazing. And one time at church, had a couple of the ladies who were working the children's church at our church, and they were up there sharing, and they were honoring them and everything. And my heart hurt. Like, I'm like, why is my heart hurting? And the Lord told me, oh, it's because you're jealous. I said, no, I'm not.
Surely not.
I'm not jealous. Why would I be jealous of them? And he goes, well, you've been, and I thought my family has a lot of jealousy, but not me. Growing up, I grew up with some of that, but it's like, not me. And then he took me back to show me jealousy had been in and envy in my life as a little girl, that those seeds would have been planted in me. And just because I would see things, and I had hatred towards my family because of the fighting and the stuff that went on in my family, and I would see other families, and I didn't know really what was going on, but to me, they were better than my family.
Mm-hmm.
So the Lord was showing me that I was jealous of other families. I had envy, but it was so subtle. But it wasn't until I was in my at that time I was in my 30s. So yeah, I was almost 40.
Wow.
And and so I repented of that,
Mhm.
and I was crying. It was a very emotional time. I was sitting there, and the Lord's speaking very clear to me about it. So the fear of not being accepted or being
Mhm.
or that I was different than somebody else and I would never be seen or known or anything. And I think that's in everybody's heart, is they want to be seen, known, and heard, right?
Mhm.
And so I, when I repented of that, and I saw the level of hatred, and there was something that happened even with a phone call with my brother that I had to deal with, that it escalated to where I just hate my family. I mean, I screamed it out, and at that time, and I realized, like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I do that.
Mhm.
And and I had to repent. I mean, I didn't have to, but I did, because
You
I wanted
chose to.
I chose
Yeah.
to do that.
Mhm.
And the Lord just flooded me with his love and
Mm.
just showing me as that little girl who wanted to escape or wanted to, but his heart's desire was for all of us. He has so much more for us.
Mhm.
Mhm.
And that his heart's desire is for us to live in safety, to live in beauty, and to live in
Mhm.
encouragement
Mhm.
and being accepted and valued and all those things. And so I had to forgive,
Mhm.
let go, and cut off and say, I don't want to hold on to any of that resentment. I don't want to hold on to jealousy or fear. And I actually went to the ladies that were up there and asked their forgiveness.
Mm.
The Lord told me to go to them, because how many people in the church and those spirits that are like the enemy, how many times do we, even in the body of Christ, because we're all human,
Mhm.
we got messy people, and you're in church, you got messy people, and that you don't even know you're being attacked.
Mhm.
But in the spirit realm, it's coming at you.
Mhm.
And because of that jealousy that I was having, it really was against them.
Mhm.
So I had to, and I said, I don't want that. And I said, I really want to share with you what God showed me. And I need to ask your forgiveness, because I was comparing.
Mhm.
Mhm.
And God said, and he even showed me, if you were doing what they were doing, you wouldn't be over here working with these kids and I love these children too.
Mhm.
I love them too. I need all of you doing your part,
Mhm.
Yeah.
and it was so, important to the Lord. It's like, so don't compare yourself. Don't wish you were over here when I called you here.
Mhm.
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 And you've got my approval. I don't
Right.
need man. But, so it's like, okay, Lord, I want your heart in that. So it's like and so that fear of, not being good enough, I think was
Mhm.
that point to be,
Mhm.
so, and gosh, the level of hatred too. He exposed it, and it was deep seated from my childhood, but I had suppressed it.
It
Mhm.
almost seems like we all have all of these
Mhm.
to a degree,
Oh yeah.
unless we have opened up our heart.
Mhm.
I will uncover ungodly desires. That's
Mhm.
that fear.
Yeah.
I'm not worthy of success.
Mhm.
That fear. And the Lord's called you to write a book.
Yeah.
He had called you to work with those kids.
Mhm.
All those things that he's opened up the door for.
Yeah.
And you had to step through it and leave the fear behind.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And sometimes it still shows up. I mean, I
Oh
battle
yeah,
it,
we're all
you
we're
know,
not perfect
but I'm
yet.
like, Lord, and the thing is, and that's something, true humility seeks wisdom.
Mm-hmm.
And I wrote down too that the arrogance keeps us from asking for help.
Yep.
And something he said, I want you to study arrogance. I want you to study humility. I want you to study confidence.
Ugh.
And I started looking at it and like, arrogance is, I don't need help.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
I need your help.
Mhm.
So when we walk in pride and arrogance, it's like, I don't need your help. It's like the Lord's like, as long as you ask me for help, I'm going to be there helping you every
Mhm.
step of the way.
Yeah.
Lord, I want to ask for your help in everything I do. And so I'll go and I say, Lord, I'm really struggling writing this book. I need help. And boom, I wake up this morning. I had this vision. You won't believe this vision I had. It was so cool. I woke up. Well, I was dreaming, and my dogs had run off, I thought. And I went looking for my dogs. And all along they were sitting right there, waiting for me. And I woke up and I felt like the Lord, yeah, I'm waiting. Like I'm going to use my. I mean, that seems strange,
It was
but
just a way to get.
it
The
was just a
connection.
way, and He got my attention in that
Mhm.
in this dream, and that my dogs are safe. I don't have to worry about them because I've had that concern, but because I don't have no back anyway. There's a whole thing to that.
Open
But
backyard.
yeah, and so I, had that little bit of fear, and like Lord saying, come sit at the table, and I began to write, and He reminded me of all these things that we're even talking about, and because the chapter I'm in is about, hidden in Christ versus hidden in darkness, hidden in the light versus hidden in darkness,
Mm.
and
Mm.
it's those and coming through those places of fear,
Mm-hmm.
So it was just really powerful that keep asking for help. And right when I did, like all of a sudden everything unfolded, and I saw these old journals that I'd written. I pulled up one, and it had some of the stuff in there that I'm writing about. And I'm like, you know exactly where to take me,
Yeah.
and to lead me.
Yeah.
And my part is ask
Mm-hmm.
Him.
Yeah, what you need to do next.
Mhm.
What are you? Well, and even just the lies that you're believing.
Yeah.
Because like I was saying, I have definitely some false beliefs just about God. So I wasn't really
Yeah.
fully trusting Him. And I feel like that is honestly something just in the very recent, past that I'm really finally getting beyond that.
Mhm.
I mean, gosh, that's a long time. I mean, it's been really.
And even a lot of people who don't know the Lord are because their view of God or whatever God is based on what people have done or not done.
Mhm.
Right.
Right. Yeah, you
Mhm.
see it through like a human lens.
Yes.
I love how faithful the Lord is to not deal with things until
Mm.
you're ready.
Yes.
And how, like, when you were
Doesn't
talking,
force it.
yeah, when you were talking about the anger, the
Mhm.
hatred, it's like it was in there, but until it fruited,
Yeah.
you really couldn't even understand it. We don't have to dig in our
Mhm.
heart to try and figure out all these things.
Let Him do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Walk with Him, love Him. If He gives you that insight, take the
Mhm.
step,
Mhm.
but don't try to operate on yourself.
Yeah.
It's not safe.
No. Well, and that's something that He's shown me too, is that where the Spirit of the Lord is, there's freedom.
Mhm.
So if the Lord is bringing it up, you're going to come out on the other side of it freer.
Mhm.
If He's not the one, if it's the enemy doing it,
Yeah.
you're going to stay in bondage, and you'll still.
Well, maybe even worse, I feel
Yeah.
like, don't you think? Like if
Yeah.
you churn things up, sometimes it can be bad. I feel like if you're not ready, it's not time. Oof. I think it can be
can
really
make you
bad.
harder.
Mhm.
It hardens your heart.
Yeah.
And some, if you're not seeking the Lord for the truth,
Ooh.
it's not, it's. I just, I'm so grateful that, I chose Christ and not
Yes.
the systems of this world,
Right.
Yeah.
in so many ways. And He's so good.
And He
Yeah.
chose us.
Yes.
He chose us.
Yes.
We have to be careful not to also look at other people and to try to dig out of them.
You can't. Mm-mm.
The Lord's.
Yeah, and
working
that's where
on
we're
each
judging
of
because of what
us.
He's done for me. That's something that when we used to work with the children and everything like that, and or even some of the leaders there too, is like, don't take your experience of me to put it on someone else.
Mhm. Yeah.
And He let me, and that was the thing. One of my pastors, was Janine, and she had shared. She said, if the Father hasn't given you a heart for someone, you have no business speaking into their life.
Mhm.
So people who
Yeah.
try to correct people or to speak into their life without getting his heart for them,
Mhm.
it's like
Damaging.
it's very damaging. I think
Mhm.
that's where a lot of people have gotten hurt in the church,
Yeah.
Mhm.
and we're all messy. We all have a responsibility, so we can't sit there and continue to blame the church, right?
Right.
Because we're all a part of it.
Mhm.
And I'm sure we've all made mistakes, because of our humanness and that. But God's grace, and that's where forgiveness comes in, and His
Yeah.
grace and His mercies are new every morning. And so, as we step through this and stepping through fear, and like let Him show us and direct us in that, and
Unpack your false
Mhm.
beliefs, or just even becoming aware that you have them. I mean, I think so much of it is just
Mhm.
not even realizing they're there.
yeah.
They're like hanging
Yeah.
out in the background.
Oh, I wrote
And-
something here. Intentionally asking Jesus for help puts me on the hook to respond, to believe, and to attempt to do something.
Yes.
And then I said, failing to acknowledge His delight in my creativity gets me off the hook of trying to create.
So this is a very
Mhm.
long chapter, and we've
Yeah.
only gone through a couple pages.
Yeah.
So we're probably going to be talking about this
For
more.
a few weeks. For a few weeks. Yeah.
Yeah, probably so.
But we all, we just really want to encourage you to seek the Lord, and He's got so much for you, and there's so much He wants to unlock,
Mhm.
and hope that you will walk with us in this journey of pushing through fear.
Mhm.
You can reach out to us at R&R Building Community at gmail.com. That's it. Yeah. And hope to hear from y'all, and hope you press in and